excited to be here. I went to Southern, so I spent a lot of my breaks in Florida, so I was very happy to be back and excited to present to you all. We're going to be talking about creating a culture of compliance in the workplace. Just so that I have an idea, like, can if you tell me, like, where are you or what you do? Like what it is. I'm just going to randomly pick. What about you?
Ministry coordinator for Spanish ministries.
Okay. About you in the back?
Principal.
Okay. You?
Treasurer.
Treasury? Right now, I don't know.
I work with publishing with the canvassing program.
Okay, just kind of have an idea. So what we're going to do today is basically walk through creating a culture of compliance starting from the ground up. Just say we're going to build a company, and we're going to start from the beginning and then work ourselves up until like we have employees and they're working for us. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. I always like to introduce my legal team in case some people are not familiar. Sometimes there's new employees. Sometimes people just don't know who we are. So these are the legal teams for NAD and for the General Conference. And Karnik is our General Counsel. Todd is the deputy at the General Conference. And Todd focuses on religious liberty and litigation. And below Karnik is Justin. He focuses on intellectual property and trademarks. Gabby focuses on tax and nonprofit legal areas. And then Renee described what I did and do. And then Jason, he's our newest attorney. He's actually here, still in Florida. He hasn't relocated. He's in the area of Miami. And he focuses on contract. And then Bob is the NAD General Counsel. He's in the classroom here next to me. He's also presenting. This is very weird because I expect to see a bunch of kids and parents here because of this. And it's just a bunch of adults, but I'll get used to that. Okay, so before we start talking about the employer-employee relationship, let's start with volunteers. This has been a very popular topic lately for us because we have General Conference session, and a lot of the departments want to use volunteers in their booth at the exhibits, so we'll be getting a lot of questions. So the first thing I want to talk about is, like, when you have a volunteer, there's got to be a no compensation expectation. And the best way to memorialize that or to document that is to have a volunteer agreement. And that basically it says, you are what you're doing for us, you're not expecting any pay. I mean, it's not that simple, but that's basically what the document says. And they sign it. So that's like what you can go back and always to support that, you didn't promise or you didn't say you were going to get paid for something. So if we can pay them, is there anything that we can give them? So yes, there are things that you can do without crossing the line into an employee. Because the risk is always you bring in a volunteer and then later on they say, well, I was actually employed because I did this, and that, and you treated me this way and that way, so you owe me, pay. So you can offer meals and per diem. You can offer travel expenses, reimbursement of those, and you can offer hotel or lodging expenses. Okay, so let's move on let's make this clear first. Like, let's make sure we're all on the same page about who the employer is before we start talking about building our own employment or workplace. So if I work for a General Conference, who is my employer? Anyone? William, you can't answer any of those questions.
The General Conference.
General Conference? Sorry, I'm bad. What about if I work for the North American division? Who's the employer? NAD, right? Union? Work for the union? The union. Work for the conference?
The conference.
What about a teacher at an academy?
The school.
The conference, yeah. Church pastor?
The conference.
Okay. And music director at a local church?
The local church. Oh, depending, it could be both.
It could be, it's a conference employee, but it could be a locally funded employee. So where the church pays for their salary, but is this like a late arriving? Is that what should I expect for the afternoon session?
Probably worse after lunch.
Yeah, probably worse than lunch. Okay, welcome. Yeah, so it's a locally funded, well, it could be a locally funded employee, but it's still a conference employee. Okay. And let me say something about this that comes up often. It's people that are doing the music at churches, especially the larger ones, right? I see a lot of this where churches want to treat their music directors as independent contractors. And it's tricky. You could do it, but for the most part, if you are telling the person what kind of songs you can sing, you tell them like when they have to show up. They're using the instruments that you own as a church. That's kind of falls more onto the employee side because you're controlling all those things. There's not that much liberty there. They can just come in and sing whatever they want. Maybe they do in your specific situation, but for the most part, churches kind of want to, like, this is the type of songs that we want to sing. So that comes up a lot. So just be careful if you have a music director at your school, at your church, and you are not treating him as an employee, maybe check with your local counsel to make sure that you're doing it right. Okay, so now let's talk about culture, right, in a workplace. What kind of culture do we want? How do we create it? And why that is important for compliance, okay? So here's some things that you can do. They're simple, that you can do to create a culture of compliance in your work site, right? You can offer, and this is a little controversial now with all the return to the office talk and all that, but you can offer, flexible arrangements for work, hybrid, remote. You can say, for example, our work hours are going to be from 7:30 to 6. You choose where you can fit your 8 hours in there. You want to come in at 7:30, you're going to come in at 9. As long as you get in your 8 hours during that time, we're okay with that. So that's just one example of something you can offer your employees. Team building activities, social outings, team lunches, desserts. Maybe you bring dessert every 3 months or every quarter for everybody. So simple things that make people feel appreciated. Training and mentorship programs are also good, especially for the newer employees. Celebrate milestones, 10 years of service at the conference. Birthdays, everybody has celebrated in the last 3 months. Let's have cake, everybody, after lunch. Raffle it, Target, $10 gift card every 3 or 4 months for no reason, just for your group of employees. Walk around. If you have the opportunity to walk around and talk to your employees where they're doing their work, in some work situations, this is not going to work, right? Maybe you have too many employees. You can't really do this with teachers so much because they're always teaching. But if you can, to the extent that you can, walk around, talk to them, you'll be amazed what you find out if you just go talk to them. Like, it's much harder for them to come talk to you and bring something up because people are uncomfortable doing it. But if you go to them, you'll be amazed about the kind of things you learn from talking to your employees. Regular feedback, supervisors give feedback to your employees. It doesn't have to be negative feedback. It could be good feedback all the time. Like, great job on that spreadsheet you sent last week. I really like how you did this or that. Or it could be negative. Not negative, but constructive. Like, hey, I noticed we had a miscommunication on this project. What can I do to make it better? It goes both ways, right? It's not always from the supervisor down. You got to also give your employees opportunities to tell you what can you do to make their job better. Like, how can they perform better? Also, yearly, you do your evaluation every year. You can also provide feedback at that time. Your goals should be measurable and objective when you're evaluating them, so they are clear what employee needs to do to perform at an adequate level. And then you can you can also use that in case there's like performance issues. You can go back to your goals and say, hey, look, this is part of your goals and they're not being met right now. Now, this goes, if you have a good culture, it helps with recruitment and retention, right? People stay because they like the culture. People come in because they heard you have a good culture, right? So how does that impact compliance? Maybe indirectly, but how does it impact it?
It helps.
It helps, right?
It motivates
It motivates people. But if you are onboarding less people and terminating less people because you have a good culture, that lowers the chances of you messing up when you're onboarding someone or terminating someone or hiring somebody, right? So you stay out of those situations where those are the tricky situations, right? That's what brings lawsuits, right? Terminations, hiring decisions, discipline, right? But if you have people that stay and people that want to come, then that lowers the chances in that sense. One other thing I want to say, I'll talk about this a little later. I was going to talk about milestones and birthdays, but I'm going to have another slide that might work better for that. Okay, so is DEI dead, right? Like there's been a lot of talk lately if you have been paying attention to the news. New administration doesn't like DEI. That's not quite what I wanted to say, but look, we want a diverse, inclusive, and we want equality at work, right? Like we want that, right? Like whatever DEI was illegal or borderline illegal before this administration is still the same. Whatever was allowed under, before in the previous administration, a lot of the stuff is still the same. So DEI has gotten kind of like a bad name here lately for the people that don't like it. But at the end of the day, DEI is not illegal, right? And we want it we want our environments to reflect this. So what are some kind of things that we can do to have a diverse and inclusive and equal work environment without attracting negative attention from the people that don't like DEI, right? Wide-scale recruitment. So you have a larger pool of people that you're looking for jobs. That opens up to a more diverse pool. And eventually, hopefully, it leads to a more diverse workforce. So if you're only recruiting at Southern, and then recruit at Southern and at Oakwood and at Washington and at Andrews. More people, more diverse, leads to an environment without you. What's illegal about DEI is if you're making employment decisions based on protected characteristics. So if you're hiring somebody because they're a woman or hiring someone because they are Hispanic, that's illegal. That was illegal before, and that's illegal now. Okay. Panel interviewing versus just one person interviewing. So when you have a group of people, we did this at one of the law firms that I was at, and basically we all interviewed in groups. There was a partner, but there was also associates, and then we ranked candidates, and then based on ranking, they made decisions, right? So it's not one person deciding who needs to come in, and if that person likes people from a certain area of the world, they're trying to always get people from their area to come in, right? You avoid that when you have a panel and you have a ranking system. Set criteria for evaluating your employees based on skills, education, and experience, and interview performance, right? So these are things that are objective, and if you rank and you have a candidate that perform better than someone else, you base your decision on that, and that's perfectly fine. But that avoids, decisions based on a protected characteristics. If you offer mentorship and training, it has to be for everybody. It can just be like for, women or African American or anything like that. Affinity groups, this is something we had at one of my law firms, which they may or may not have it now, but basically what's wrong about this is like when you have like the Hispanic attorneys group, we had a law firm that was like thousands of people, or the Asian Pacific group. Those things are not really okay if they're not open to everybody, right? So you can have your Hispanic group, but you can invite everybody. If you do that, then it's legal. If you don't, then you may not like what you hear from an enforcement agency from the government. Clear and known protocols for harassment and discrimination reporting. This goes to like if you are an underrepresented minority in your workplace and you feel like you can report harassment and something's going to be done about it, that makes it more inclusive, right? If I feel like nobody's going to hear me, then that's exclusive, right? So this is another way that if your employees know that this is how you do it and we want to hear from you, makes it more inclusive. Here's what I wanted to say earlier that I did about the birthdays and the celebrations. If you want to celebrate Black History Month or Hispanic Heritage, that's fine. There's no problem with doing that. And then again, not just hiring, but in the performance, promotions. Your promotions should be merit-based and based on the kind of work that you do, and not on like your color of your skin.
I have a question.
Yes.
With the team building category, things like Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage, is it an all or nothing type of, like Native American month?
Oh, you said you celebrate one but not the other?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do you need to do all if you do one?
that would be better. Yeah, if you do one. There's some like kind of obscure that nobody like celebrate too much, but they're out there. I don't know, but like the ones that are pretty, but everyone knows about these two, right? And there may be a few other ones that everybody knows. Like if you do like, there's 3 that everybody knows, and you're only like doing one, that's bad. That's a bad look, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay, so once you have created, talking about DEI, you've created some kind of culture that you want to have, you know what it is, you have your goal, you want to do it inclusive and diverse, then you need an employee handbook, right? That's like the next step. And these are some of the things that you should include in your handbook if you don't have them. If you do offer remote work and hybrid, it's good to have there like specify what are the hours that you have to be available, right? If it's the employee shows that they want to go remote, and it's nothing that you're promoting or wanting, but you're gonna let them do it, like who's responsible for what they're gonna need in their home office, right? How are you gonna keep that employee engaged in the office if they're remote? Like I have a friend that works somewhere where they have to come in a certain amount of times a month, so that they don't have days or whatever. It's just like you can come in whenever, but you gotta at least come in X amount of days a month or a week. So how do you keep that office engagement? Maybe you have one day where everybody has to be there. I would say it has to be clear that this, I think what happens with all these remote works is like it's not working, and the employee thinks it's like their right to have this arrangement, right? That they're entitled to it, and it's not a right? It's a privilege, and it's revocable, and it's at the discretion of the employer. Like once you give it, that doesn't mean that's a permanent, forever type of arrangement. Gotta be flexibility on schedule changes and in-person meetings, right? So like Monday you're scheduled to work at home, but we need you to come in. You need to come in, right? Like, and doesn't mean like we're gonna give you another day in the week to make up for that day. It just doesn't really work that way. If you want to do it, fine, but I think you gotta. This helps treating everybody the same, because what happens also with these arrangements is like you start seeing how some people either get it, some don't, or some people have more flexibility than others, and that's what creates kind of problems in the workplace. Accommodations. These are some federal laws that I'm sure you're aware about: ADA, PWFA, the PUMP Act. How do I start an accommodation request? Who do I go to? Do I go to HR? Do I go to my supervisor? It's good for employees to know those things, because then they can come back and say, well, I needed leave, but I couldn't. I asked someone else, but that wasn't the person you wanted them to ask, but there was nothing that tell you where to go. Anti-harassment policies. So one thing I want to say here is like, is your harassment policy broader than sexual harassment? Like I had a situation once where there was this worker that was acting in a pretty offensive, disrespectful, and unprofessional way at work with his coworkers. But none of that was based on race, gender, sex, national origin. So when we went to look at the handbook and find, okay, where does this fit so that we can go with discipline, it didn't really fit anywhere, because their harassment policy was pretty much limited to sexual harassment. So if you want to be able to discipline and also to maintain and sustain and promote a professional workplace, then maybe your harassment policy needs to go beyond sexual harassment. Does that make sense? It's a hostile work environment type thing that you want to avoid, right? It's not just sexual harassment. Does your handbook expressly states that you have the right to amend it without notice, that it's not a contract, and that employment is at will. So those are other things that you might want to make sure that your handbook states. Okay, let's talk about a few more things about employee handbooks. Does it talk about the different types of employees that you have? You have hourly, salary, contract. And the reason why that's important is because some of the benefits are, some employees that are maybe salaried are eligible to some benefits that hourly employees are not. So they need to know that.
I'm sorry, put it back on a little bit for the, where you said it's not a contract, the handbook.
Yes.
I was advised by our school board to have our staff sign the end of the
Yeah.
employee handbook. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fine. That's just an acknowledgement that they have it, they read it, and they agreed to buy for the policies. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think what it gets tricky is that like you don't want to say something like, for example, like the remote work, right? Like if you sign it, they think it's a contract. Now they feel like they're entitled to that, right? Like that's not really how it works. Yeah, so benefits, yeah, some employees may get special travel, tuition assistance, remote work, eligibility, but not everybody does. So it's good to be able to differentiate and tell people what they are eligible and what they're not as far as benefits. Different ways to report harassment. We talked about that. Hey, do you go to your supervisor? Should you go to do you want your employees to come directly to HR? Do you have some sort of whistleblower, confidential way to report it? What are the expectations of employment, such as like what is the attendance policy, behavior, conduct that goes back to that harassment point that I made earlier. You have to be a church member. Those are the type of things that you want to expressly state because that's what you can want to point back out if one of them becomes an issue. Social media, you have a social media policy as far as like what your employees should and should not be doing in social media. And both, it's just their personal, but also like the church social media. How do you communicate changes to your employees? So if you make a change in the handbook, are you telling the employees that you're making that change? Or is it going to come as a surprise when you try to enforce something that you changed a year ago, but nobody had a clue that you had? This a discipline section that if you want to do progressive discipline or if you want to do something else, but it lays out like, verbal warning, written warning, probation, those type of things. And also a statement there that, that doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen every single time. I mean, if you have somebody that commits gross misconduct, you're not going to go through the progression, right? That person should be terminated right away. So it gives you some flexibility, but in some cases where, it's not gross misconduct, employers, supervisors, or employees kind of have an expectation of how it would go. You have a section on leave, like FMLA, paid time off, section on yearly reviews so that your employees know that they're going to be evaluated once a year. Meal and break times. I know like in the GC, hourly employees that work full-time get 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes in the afternoon. But that's it, right? So make sure that your employees are getting that, but also that are not going above. So this is where you would make that clear. You have a dress code policy. That's also something good to have. How about AI policy? Here are some things, if you don't have one, that you might want to think about when you're developing one. The scope and purpose and the definitions of what AI is. What kind of AI use are you allowed to do and what is prohibited? Do you have to disclose if you use AI for any of your work product? What are the confidentiality issues associated with AI? You have a frequently asked questions section. Who do you contact at work if you have a question about AI? And this should be a collaboration between HR, IT, and legal. Okay, then once you have a policy, you have to do training on AI use and policies. Talk about the policy and what is allowed, what is not allowed. And also on the HR side, if you're using AI to write job descriptions or interview questions, or screen resumes or things like that, make sure that it's not discriminatory, because if it is, if you're using a list of questions that is discriminatory, but maybe it's not clearly discriminatory, but it does have an impact on a protected characteristic, or if you're writing a job description that it's very discriminatory towards maybe like people with disabilities, but you don't intend it to do it that way, or you're not intending to discriminate, but that's how it comes across, and you use that, then you can't shift the blame to your AI vendor or your AI developer, right? It's going to come back to you as well. So that's why it's important to be aware of what are good, because AI is helpful, right? It's just we got to be careful how we use it. Some of the things that we also see this in work product, and that's why I was talking about disclosure, right? Some of the words that AI uses, like underscores, comprehensive, crucial, intricate, pivotal, cutting edge, innovative, first, second, third, in addition, moreover, however. If you see a lot of that stuff in your work product, yeah, maybe it was generated. Okay, so now we have our handbook and some of our policies. Now we're gonna start with the job description and job postings, okay? We gotta bring our employees into our workplace. First thing you wanna make sure your job description has is the essential functions of the job, right? Anybody know why that's important?
You want to attract the right people.
You wanna attract the right people, make sure they can do the job. You want to tell them up front what they're going to be doing, right? You don't want somebody coming in and, then you realize that they don't like or they can't do what you hired them to do. It's also important in the context of ADA accommodations, right, for disabilities. If someone comes to you and they request the disability accommodation, the first thing you want to do is go back to their job description to see if what they're asking impacts their essential functions, right? Because if it does, then you have to figure out if with an accommodation they can still do the essential function, or even with an accommodation they cannot. So if they cannot do it with the accommodation, are you required to offer that to them? No, right? Or it may be that, yes, there is an accommodation here that would help them do the essential function, but it's too difficult or expensive for us to provide it. Are you required to do it in that? You're not, right? So this is why it's important to have this from the get-go, right? Starting out. In person, right? You want to tell people, if you're expecting that employee to be in the office every day or every week, then you might want to tell them up front, right? You don't want to bring them in and then because they, remote work has become so popular that they feel like they don't even have to ask about that because everybody does it. So, and then they come in and they ask for that and you tell them no, not for this position. They tell them up front, right? Like, don't wait for them to come in and ask you. Certifications and license requirements, right? For example, we have one, the GC, where if you come in as an accountant and you're not CPA certified, you have a certain amount of time to do it. And if you don't do it within the year or two or whatever long they give you, then that's a requirement of the position. So you no longer have it, and you can't really blame anybody but yourself because they told you up front that you had to be CPA certified within X amount of years. Does it tell people if it's a part-time, full-time, hourly, or salary position? This may not be a big deal in Florida, but in other states, you're required to tell candidates in the posting what the salary range is and what benefits you're offering. And I don't think we were used to doing this as an organization, and a lot of private companies weren't, but more and more states are passing this. So it's also become important because if you are advertising, if you're hiring, open to hire people outside of Florida or hiring remote, then you want to make sure that you're complying with state laws. So if you look at a GC posting or an NAD posting or an ADRA posting right now, I said hopefully because they've been advised to do this, but that doesn't mean that they're doing it. But I've seen it in some cases, but I also seen some that are not doing it yet. You will see that there's a salary range now, and that there's a list of like benefits offered there. And do not tell them how much they're going to be paid exactly, because that varies with experience and other things, maybe where they are located. But you got to give them a range. Did you have a question? No. Okay. Okay, so now we have the job posting and the description, and we're going to bring people in to start hiring people. So you want to bring people in that fit your culture, right? That's what we kind of talked about at the beginning, that if you have people that fit your culture, then there's less people coming in and less people leaving, right? Because you're able to retain. So what kind of things should, you could ask your candidates to see if they fit what you're looking for? Like, describe a previous work environment where you were happy, where you thrived, where you had professional growth. That's one question you can ask. Describe an occasion where you received feedback and how you implement it. When you had a disagreement, how you resolved it. How would a former coworker describe you? What are some role models besides Jesus? Talk to us about a time you took a lead on a project and how you learned from it. So these are things you can ask to kind of figure out if the candidate is good for what you're looking for. They may be good for somewhere else, but maybe not for you. Do they like frequent feedback, or do they just like maybe more or less frequent? Do they like to work on their own? Do they like to work in team setting? Depending on what you're looking for, do they like close supervision or more autonomy? So listen for things that are related to the ability to grow on the job or professionally. If you have somebody that you can see in the resume that started out, at a certain level and moved up a couple of levels within, you can see that person, grew and, they're motivated. If they were somewhere in 10 years and stayed in the same position, maybe I don't know if that you're looking for, but that tells you something, right? Can they talk about their strengths and weaknesses? They are self-aware of what they do well and what they're maybe not doing. I don't do everything well, right? I feel like I can tell you what I'm not good at, and the things that I'm good at. So people are able to talk about that. That's a good thing, right? If they're clueless, that's probably not a good thing. How do they manage stress? How do they like their work arrangements? Do they like to come into the office? Do they prefer a hybrid schedule? Do they like fully remote? Do they have management experience? This is something good that shows you that a person can take responsibility and lead. How do they prefer to communicate? By email, by messaging, by face-to-face. Some people, it's feasible for you to go and talk to them every time you have a new project you want them to do. But there's some work environments where that's just not possible, so it's more of email that. So are they comfortable with that if that's the way that you prefer method of communication? I worked at a place where I had a supervisor that I was extremely micromanaged. And part of that was because half of the job was something that was completely new to me. So I get that, but I didn't realize how exhaustive that was until I left. And so for me that didn't work, but maybe somebody else likes a lot more supervision. So asking things like that. Then I went somewhere else where it was like the opposite, the extreme, where I was basically, okay, welcome in, do your thing, which was a little uncomfortable because I was new and I kind of wanted more direction and supervision, but that's not what was given. Now, if I had to pick between those two, I picked that one. I don't want to be micromanaged. But some people may prefer the other one, right? So it's just good to kind of talk to them and see how they their management style, how they communicate, to see if that fits the way that you do things where you are. Other things you can talk about is, if there's a time that you ever felt overwhelmed at work and how did you manage that? It's good to hear how they reacted to things like that. You ever missed a deadline? How did you handle it? Talk about things that you do well and what kind of things are more are more challenging. That's kind of way asking your strengths and weaknesses without saying strengths and weaknesses, right? What do you do well? What's more challenging at work? Some things, questions to avoid. Are you pregnant? Are you in a same-sex relationship? Are you married? How old are you, or how many more years do you expect to work? Do you have children? Stay away from those. Okay, so in Florida, there's a no negligence presumption if an employer conducted a background check and no unsuitability information was revealed. So that means like if you bring someone in, that person, let's say you bring in a teacher, that teacher sexually abuses another student, and you ran a background check, no red flags, were raised, then you're good, right? Like unless you did something else where you like suspected or somebody told you, then you should be good. So this is important that you do background checks. This is why, because if you do a background check under Florida law, it kind of gives you a layer of protection. It's also good because you don't want to bring in bad people to work, right?
Question.
Yeah.
What happened if you did a background check and you know that something was done, was wrong, and regardless of that, you decided to hire the person, and then something happens?
Yeah, then you're looking at a big lawsuit and a lot of damages. And that's how it happened, and still happens today. I'll tell you here in a little bit on a story that. But if you're doing a criminal background check, you have to comply with the Fair Credit and Reporting Act. So that means that you have to follow certain steps. I think I have a slide after this that talks about that. But here's another check that sometimes we forget. If that employee has already worked for Adventist organization, there's a email you can send at employmentscreening@adventistrisk.org. If you didn't get that, I can get it to you at the end. Basically, this is ARM. If you have like a pastor, a teacher, or an admin, an accountant that's coming from another Adventist organization, or maybe not directly, but in their resume at some point there was an Adventist organization, you should email that. And because if ARM has a file on that person, they should let you know, and that way you can make a decision whether you want to go forward with that or not.
The email again?
Adventist, hold on, I'll get to you. Employments, plural. Actually, no. Employment screening, one together. Employment screening. At Adventist Risk, one word. .org. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
For pathfinders and adventurers, we always screen the parents when they're going camping.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I took the initiative of screening the parents if they were going to be around in the meetings.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think any volunteer or anytime you're gonna have somebody other than a family around other children, any other than a family member around other children, then it's good to do a screen. I know cost is an issue, so if you if you don't have enough money to do all of it, definitely volunteers need to be screened. That's the whoever's leading out and whoever's coming on a trip, all those people have to be screened. Same with schools. If you have parents coming in to do volunteer hours, they should be screened. And then I don't think this is a problem in Florida, but it is an issue for a lot of other states, including Maryland. You cannot ask about criminal background during an interview, and you cannot you cannot ask about criminal background in an application, and also during your first interview. Once you offer a conditional offer, then you can do background. That way, none of that came into your decision making, right? It was subjective. It didn't have anything to do with a past history of criminal background. But you don't bring that person in if they do have one, because you are doing that check after you give them that offer. But that offer is subject to passing a background check. I don't know that that's a problem here, But we had to remove questions from our applications in Maryland because after this law passed. Also, of course, if you have a bus driver or anybody that's gonna drive for you in any way, they should get a driver's license check as well. So going back to this ARM check, I had a situation where an Adventist person was hired. This person had already worked for Adventist organization in the past, and this person had an inappropriate relationship, and ARM was aware of it, and ARM had a file on this person. And the employer, the Adventist employer in this case, didn't do a thorough check through ARM, and they hired this person. I think they did check references with previous employers, but nothing came up. But there was an actual file, like a lengthy file on this. So this person is hired. Later on, this person writes an article, publishes an article. Somebody reads it, recognizes the name, and says something about this to someone else. That eventually ends up on my desk with the report. So now you have somebody here that it's currently hired, doesn't have no issues to this point that we know of, or even in the recent past. But there's this past of this very inappropriate relationship that was investigated, found to be a fact, and somebody already recognized this and said something. It was never public, but it came to us. Now, this person that made the report was not the only person that knows about this, because this happened in a setting where everybody else that was in that setting knows about it, right? So now the employer is put in the position where, what do, right? Like, they hire someone, they didn't know about this, he doesn't have any, it's a man in this case, didn't have any issues recently that they know of. So are you gonna keep him on and just kind of cross your fingers that nothing else happens? Are you gonna terminate that person even though they haven't had any disciplinary issues? It just becomes really complicated, right? But if they had known, if they had read this file at the beginning, then they could have said, hey, we feel like this is in the past and it's not gonna happen. And if something came up, they wouldn't be caught by surprise, right? They took that risk on knowingly. And hopefully they have a plan to address it if it ever comes up. Or you say, this is what I would have done. It's like, thanks, but no thanks. We'll just go with someone else. We just don't need that. But they never did this piece. So they put themselves in that position.
So in the job description, is there not like a clause or something that says, based on any previous issues, we can terminate this?
I mean, most of our employees are at will, so you can terminate them for whatever reason. We just don't want to. We typically don't unless there is an actual reason. So no, there is, to answer your question, there isn't anything in our application that says if you don't disclose something that comes up later, we're going to fire you. But we can let go anybody. As long as it's not a protected characteristics, we can let go. But we just don't want to do that, right? Like, we want to terminate people for a reason, for a good reason, not just for any reason.
Question.
Yes.
What if someone tells you in the interview that you ask them what do they do in their free time? They say, I have a YouTube channel, I do podcasts, and if you check it out, it's not something that you really want to hire. What they're saying is not something that you feel that aligns with the company.
Yeah.
But if you don't check it out, obviously you wouldn't know. You may still hire the person, but they're telling you up front. This is what I do online.
Yeah.
But you didn't check it out.
Yeah.
But you hire them, and then you check it out, find out it's not what you want, then you're kind of stuck too.
Yeah, it's a bad situation. I mean, I think at that point, whether you ask or you didn't, or you knew or you didn't, once you find out that they're doing something that doesn't align with your mission or your beliefs, you have a reason to let go. But again, why are you doing that? Like, if you could have found out from the beginning, you avoid a situation. So it's not more. Compliance is also about like staying out of things that you could potentially be in, right? Like you're saying, check that out before. Somebody tells you they have a YouTube channel, look at it before you offer them a job. If you're hiring somebody that works for an Adventist organization, do a background check through ARM to make sure there's not a file. Let's see. Okay, so going back to the Federal Credit Reporting Act, if you do background checks, make sure you're giving them notice and you're getting written consent. Those are two separate things. They could be on the same document, but they have to clearly be distinct from each other. That's just a technical requirement that you can get in trouble for, but it's just what the law says. At the end of the day, I don't think it makes a difference, but that's what we're supposed to do. If you get a background check and there is something you don't like and you plan on maybe not offering that person the job, then you have to give him a pre-adverse notice letter, give him a copy of their rights under the FCRA, a copy of the report, and an opportunity to address any inaccuracies. Because, you know, some things, I've had my report where there's some things that are not illegal, but inaccurate, right? So it's not out of the question that something could come up that is not accurate. So you got to give him that person a chance to correct it. And if you decide in the end that you do want to not hire that person, then you have to kind of do some other things through the FCRA, tell them who the third-party agency that ran the report was, tell them that they had nothing to do with it, that this was your decision, that they have a right to get a copy of it and to dispute it. So it's a very technical law, so you should get familiar with it, especially if you get something that you don't like and you plan to not hire that person. Make sure you look at the FCRA to make sure you're following all their requirements. Because like I said, it's very technical, and each of those things, if you don't follow them, they can come back to haunt you.
So what I hear you saying is that if something comes out from the background check and I choose not to employ, I have to disclose that that's the reason why?
Well, once you see something that you don't like, you immediately, and you think this can affect what happens in the end, then you let them know, hey, look, this came up, and here's what it is. Here are your rights, and if that's not accurate, you have some time to figure that out, and if not, then we may go ahead and not terminate. I think she's next, and then you, William.
Can I just interject?
Okay, yes.
If that comes up at the local entity, please reach out to conference because we make sure that those letters are compliant with all the FCRA regulations. We'll help you with that.
I was wondering if we had templates for these notices and deadlines.
CHR. They'll help you with that.
Okay, so let's see how am I doing on time. Okay. Harassment and retaliation training, once a year recommended. So believe it or not, like most employers do harassment training every year. That's not a legal requirement, but everybody does it, and we'll talk about why that is. Well, part of it is because changes in the law and changes in culture, right? Like some things that are definitely harassing now, maybe 20 years ago, people didn't think were harassing, right? Or things that were illegal, 10 years ago are not maybe illegal now. Or, for example, I'll give you 5 minutes. Okay. I thought it was until 11:55.
The next plenary starts at 11.
Okay. All right. So let's quickly go through this. So basically, the real reason why these are harassment training is important is because it's a defense to harassment. So like if a coworker harasses another and they sue you as the employer, one of your defenses is that you took enough steps to prevent it and that you took measures to prevent it from happening again. If you're not doing training every year, then you can't really say that you're doing everything to prevent it, right? So that's why you do it every year, even though it's not required by law, because it serves as a defense in case somebody sues you. Let's see. Cybersecurity trainings, good to know what are the latest fish scams, best practices in protecting data, and reporting it. Okay, here's one that we need to be aware about. If you are an hourly employee, if you travel, like if your assistant travels on a Sunday to an event that's going to be Monday through Friday, that travel time on Sunday is compensable. So you got to make sure you travel, and that counts to their 40 hours. So if they work 40 hours that week from Monday through Friday, plus the travel, then that travel time, it takes them into overtime. Also, if you're doing onboarding training, enrollment benefits, you need to pay them for that time when they're in your workplace. And remember that the salary minimum for exempt employees went back to $684. That case is on appeal right now. And until the appeal resolves, this is what the minimum is. That might change if the appeal goes a different way. I'm going to skip this. Again, this is about ADA. If you do have an in-person requirement for your job, but somebody comes to you with a ADA accommodation to work remotely, just don't reject that outright. Go through the process of figuring out if it's an essential function and whether you can do a reasonable accommodation. This is a website that I've used this before, and this is helpful when somebody comes and asks for an accommodation and you're not super comfortable with that accommodation, but you want to propose something else. You can go to this website up here and you can type in the disability and the limitation and the job, and it gives you some ideas of what to do.
Wait.
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to rush you because I thought I had till 11:55, and I don't have that time. Tell me when I'm good to go. Okay.
Thank you.
Here are some things. I'm going to skip this. If you have a USERA policy, anybody knows what that is? Yeah. Right. You guys can read. You should not treat it different than bereavement or jury duty. So like if you get like 5 days for jury duty paid, or 5 days for somebody, your family died, and that's paid, if it's USERA, you also have to treat it the same way. I know you have a presentation on that, so I'm not going to cover that. But the main thing with discipline and terminations is to be proactive. Like a lot of times happens is like they come to you when like they're done, right? Like, and that's the handbook has a discipline progression. You never follow that, and then you want to get them out of the door the next day. So be proactive, not retroactive. I'm going to skip this. Skip that. Okay, here we go. Can an employee take FMLA leave to care for a sibling undergoing medical treatment? No. Why is that? Yeah. So it could happen, right?
Not spouse?
Yeah. Yeah. Spouse too. Yeah. But it could happen, right? Because if you are the legal guardian of a sibling and they're incapable of taking themselves, then it could happen. Can an employee take FMLA to care for a daughter that has C-section? Yeah, so they're under 18 and they're incapable. So it could happen. So we think that not, but like there's certain situations where it could happen. Can an employee use FMLA to take a child to monthly orthodontic appointments? No, because it's not a serious health condition, right? Okay, female school bus driver requests assignment for desk work for 2 weeks of pregnancy. Which of these laws would be best for her? PWFA. Why that is? Pregnancy, and it's a short-term leave, and because pregnancy is not a disability under the ADA. DEI. What if you have one promotion, 2 candidates, one is a minority, both have equal performance? How do you avoid a protected characteristic-based decision? Panel. Years of service, experience, prior related experience, qualifications, training, certifications, recommendations from other people, and maybe you have a thing you want to do in that department, and you ask them, okay, what is your vision, your plan, or your solution for this issue? And then you pick whoever gives you the best answer. Last one, receptionist at the front desk worker at an academy requests an additional 15-minute break in the afternoon to alleviate back pain. She can finish her shifts or hours without needing the break, but it helps. Is she eligible for an ADA accommodation? That's assumes she has a doctor's notice. Yeah, she's eligible. It doesn't. You don't need to need the accommodation. If it's reasonable and it's certifiable, then you're okay. You can. But if it's let's say that happens in a school, a small school, where it's the front office staff is the principal, and the front desk receptionist, and the principal teaches all afternoon.
Yeah.
Then it becomes harder because, like, how do you replace that person in those 15 minutes? All right, so train, stay up to date. These are some of the things that I use: subscriptions to newsletters and legal updates. Go to conferences, seminars, and don't wait. Like, if you see an issue, like, address it immediately. And that's it.